Hello, welcome to The Honest Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. In this video, we're going to be looking at all of the rules for Soulblight Gravelords in Age of Sigmar 4. We're going to find out whether or not they are a dead end or if they're fantastic. It's vampires, you see. That sounds pretty good. Anyway, we're going to be going through all of the different rules, and we're going to be looking at the war scrolls. We're going to be talking about how they work. This is going to be one of several videos that I make because we are going to be looking at the points. We're going to be doing tier lists on the units and a bunch of other stuff. So hopefully this is the video for you to help you learn how to play this army and to understand it better. If you do have any questions, please do leave them in the comments below. I'll try to answer every question that I see, and hopefully that way you'll be able to jump into 4th edition Age of Sigmar and have the best time. Also, if you, even if this video has been out a while, it should be pretty relevant, I hope, for a long time until the book comes out. And there probably will be some timestamps down the bottom in the future, and so hopefully that's all going to be there. Anyway, let's dive straight in. The first rules that we're going to look at are the battle traits. When you are playing a Soulblight Gravelords army, if you're playing any army in Age of Sigmar 4, you have a set of rules which overlap your units. And these are battle traits. They're special, unique rules to your army. Let's have a look at what they are. The first one is the hunger, where once per turn for the army at the end of any turn, which is a dedicated phase in Age of Sigmar, the end of turn phase, you're going to be able to use the hunger. You pick a friendly, you pick each friendly vampire unit. Vampire is a keyword. Age of Sigmar is built around keywords, and those keywords can be located at the bottom of a war scroll. That use a fight ability, which is also a type of ability, this turn to be the targets. Heal D3 to each target, and heal 2D3 if that target instead, if it destroyed an enemy unit this turn using a fight ability. So it is going to need to be in combat. One of the ways you can heal units outside of combat is a command ability called Rally, but that is predicated on you not being in combat. This is specifically another heal that you're able to get if you are in combat. So it's encouraging you to take vampire units and make them be in combat. And you can heal even more if you're able to destroy a unit, which is pretty good. On the flip side of that, but that is only going to be locked to vampire units. This army is pretty much made up of vampire units and then skeleton and zombie units, and then never the twain shall meet in some ways. Sometimes they buff each other, it depends, but it's almost two armies working kind of semi-independently. We'll explain that more as we go through. Next one is Deathly Invocation, which is an ability that you can use once per turn across your whole army in any hero phase, which means every hero phase. You pick a friendly Soulblight Gravelords hero to use this ability, then pick 3 friendly Death Rattle or Deadwalker units wholly within 12 inches of that hero to be the target. So that can be other Death Rattle or Deadwalker heroes. If the target is damaged, you can heal 3 to the target. If the target is not damaged, you can return a number of same models to it with a combined health characteristic of up to 3. So, put 3 units of skeletons, put 3 models back into each one. That's actually pretty good, because some people have got command traits and other things where all they're able to do is add +3 to the control score. This is basically doing that, but in a slightly different way. So Deathly Invocation is really good because basically you've got healing for 2 halves of the book. So if you were to build that book in, it's good, basically, which is nice. The other ability that you have is the Unquiet Dead, where you pick a friendly Death Rattle or Deadwalkers unit that has not been deployed, and you do this all in the deployment phase, which is another phase. Set that unit in reserve in the grave. It just means move it to the sideboard. It has now been deployed, and you cannot set up more friendly units in the grave than there are on the battlefield. Perfect. So half the number of units that are in the grave cannot be, it has to be the same number on the battlefield, and it can only be Death Rattle and Deadwalker units. So it's going to be your Black Knights, it's going to be your Skeleton Warriors, it's going to be your Zombies. In your movement phase, you can use the Rising Dead ability, where you can pick a friendly unit that is in the grave, so units that have been in reserve, and set up that unit wholly within 6 inches of a terrain feature, more than 9 inches from all enemy units. You do that in your movement phase, and when you set units up from reserve, they're no longer able to move in the movement phase, but they still are able to charge. And lastly, you have a command ability. You can tell something is a command ability because it's got that little 1 symbol you can see at the top right-hand corner. That command ability is going to cost a command point, and you generate command points for a couple of different ways. At the start of each battle round, you'll get 4. If you have less auxiliaries than your opponent in your list, you'll have 1 for the first battle round. And if you start your army list of 2,000 points with 1950 points or less, you'll have an additional 1 as well, which is all pretty good. In fact, actually, auxiliaries gets you a command point every turn, and then 1950 gets you 1 in the first battle round. Also, if you're the underdog, as in you're losing, you'll get an additional command point. But either way, the command point resource is something that you'll use to do command abilities, and this is one. And the way this works, it's called Endless Legions, is you pick a friendly non-unique Death Rattle or Deadwalkers unit that started the battle with 2 or more models that's been destroyed, as in, they've been killed. Set up a replacement unit within half the number of models from the target unit, rounding up. So if you had a unit of 20, it's going to be 10. Wholly within 12 inches of friendly Soulblight Gravelords hero, or wholly within 6 inches of a terrain feature. It must be set up more than 9 inches from all enemy units. That's pretty standard, the whole setup for outside of 9 inches. The important part about that is that means you're going to be able to charge. The other cool and exciting ability about this is it's done in any movement phase, meaning you can set up units in the movement phase. The reason this is pretty spicy is because your opponent in their movement phase will do all of their move abilities, which includes moving, and then you'll do your abilities. This means after your opponent's moved, you're going to be able to put a unit 9 inches away from them, potentially creating a screen or blocking out parts of the board, which is pretty spicy. However, you can also, that would be in your opponent's turn. If it's your movement phase, you can set up the replacement unit more than 3 inches from all enemy units instead of more than 9. However, if you do that, you're not going to be able to charge in the next turn. A reason that you might want to do this is because you might want to just put those bodies on objectives to score points. And that's how you win the game, is to hold objectives, stand on circles, which are available from thehonestwargamer.com, where we have these lovely objective markers which you can buy. Okay, so those are the battle traits, and interestingly, almost all of them are related to Death Rattle and Deadwalker zombies, whereas vampires only are really engaged in the heal. This means that the vampire units, which normally end up being kind of like the stronger units, are probably going to be more self-sufficient and than needing any battle traits to work. But the Deadwalker and Death Rattle units are going to require all this kind of synergy to be way more effective. So there are battle formations that you have for your army, and when you write your army list, you'll choose one of these 4 battle formations to define how your army is going to play. The first one is Legion of Sheesh, and that is going to grant a passive to your army called Horror Unending, where you can pick 1 additional target when using the Deathly Invocation ability. That's the ability to either heal 3 to a Death Rattle or zombie unit, or return 3 models, which is pretty nice. That's a bunch of different models returned to different units, but they all have to be different. The next one is Bacchanal of Blood. This is my personal favorite, called Atrocity of the Night. That's the passive that you get, where you add 1 to casting rolls for friendly vampire units that are not in combat, or +1 to wound rolls for combat attacks made by friendly vampire units that charge in the same turn. I quite like this because you've got some pretty strong vampire units, either mounted vampire units or specifically Blood Knights, where getting +1 to wound is, it's not Atrocity of the Night, sorry, it's the Aristocracy of the Night. I apologize. The Aristocracy of the Night. I do have a little bit of dyslexia. Anyway, in combat, and you add 1 to wound rolls for combat attacks made by friendly vampire units. So, we love that. Okay? That's good. +1 to cast is especially good in Age of Sigmar 4 because you want to cast a lot of spells. We're hoping we have some vampires that are level 2 wizards. That is mega stonks, because if that's true, then both of those casts that we have are going to be an additional +1 to cast, which is good. There's a lot of manifestations in Age of Sigmar 4. You want as many casts as you can get, and +1 is really good. And then +1 to wound is also really good. It's a double good. The Deathstench Drove has an ability called Drag Down and Torn Apart, which you're able to use once per turn at the end of any turn, which does mean at the end of every turn. You pick up to 3 friendly Deadwalker units in combat to be the targets, and for each target you make a pile-in move, which means you could get more models onto an objective to potentially score before you work out scoring, which is nice because all of these end-of-turn abilities are used before you work out scoring. In addition, then may pick an enemy unit in combat with a target and roll a d3. On a 2+, inflict an amount of mortal damage on that enemy equal to the roll. Okay, so that's pretty nice, because really what you're talking about there is if you have some Deadwalker units that are alive, which question mark about that at the moment, but if they are alive at the end of any turn, then you can potentially do 3d3 mortal damage across the enemy army at the end of every turn. That's a lot of mortal damage every single turn at the end. Quite nice. Finally, you have Tide of Bones and Blades, which is the passive you get from being in the Death March battle formation. The effect of this is you add one to the rend characteristic of melee weapons used by death rattle units that charge in the same turn for attacks that target a unit that has fewer models in the attacking unit. So this is what we call a double stipulation, because A, we need to have charged, which is fine, we like charging anyway, but B, we need to outnumber the enemy unit, and then when we finally do so, we get +1 rend, which is fine. Now, this could be good on like a big unit of, let's say, Black Knights. So they're going to be charging in. If they're charging into a monster, +1 rend on their attacks might stack with other pluses to rend that we can find. So we could actually get a massive rend value in those units, but it really depends on what those units are going to look like, and we're going to talk about that later. On your army list, you are going to be able to, for one of your heroes, choose a heroic trait. It does not have to be your general, and it cannot be a unique unit, let's say like Nagash. Instead, it's got to be a non-unique unit. There are 3 to choose from, and the first one is the Lash of the Sire, where once per turn in your hero phase, you can pick another friendly Soulblight Gravelords unit within this unit's combat range to be the target, and roll a dice. On a 2+, if the target is not in combat, it can move d6 inches. If the target is in combat, it can make a pile-in move. Now, this is quite interesting because it doesn't say whether or not you can or can't make that move into combat, which is kind of odd. And the pile-in move is, I guess, okay for the same reason we talked about the ability previously for getting more bodies onto objectives, or just bringing more of the horde to be able to make attacks. But because you've got 3-inch attack on all your weapons, I can't imagine you're going to need that. Anyway, either way, I think the d6-inch move in the hero phase is pretty nice because you're going to be able to move potentially a really big model up the board a little bit faster, and your opponent can't guarantee how far that's going to be, so they're going to have to assume that you're moving 6 even if you roll a 2. The next one is once per turn in your hero phase, called Unbending Will, where you pick a friendly Death Rattle or Deadwalker zombie unit that has 2 or more models and is wholly within 12 inches of this unit to be the target. You add d6 to the target's control score for the rest of the turn. So that is only pick a single unit. It's only pick Death Rattle or Deadwalker units, and it's increased the control score by d6, which is fine, but like not game changing. And lastly, the Unhinged Rampager. It lets you re-roll the charge rolls for this unit in your charge phase. This does mean if you're able to build a very combat heavy character, re-roll charges is super effective. But it's only going to work in your charge phase. But either way, I like Unhinged Rampager the best and Lash of the Sire second. In your army list, you're also able to give one of your heroes an artifact of power. And these are called Deathly Heirlooms, and there are 3, and I like all 3 of them. The first one is an Orb of Enchantment, which you can use once per battle in any combat phase. You pick an enemy hero in combat to be the target has Strike Last for the rest of the turn. This is really, really nice, because it's an enemy hero, and this is good for 2 different situations. Number 1, the enemy hero has charged you, and you do not want them to be able to hit you before you hit them. Strike Last. So this will be particularly good on like a large monster that wants to have big dueling battles with the enemy. It also works really nicely if you're intending to charge a big enemy hero, let's say like Archeon, because giving the opposing unit Strike Last means all of your units will be able to hit it first. It's much better than giving your unit Strike first, because it means you're able to bring more units into the combat before it's able to fight back. So that's pretty good. It's once per battle because it is very strong. The next one, Shard of the Night, is a passive that you'll give to your unit where it ignores modifiers to save rolls for shooting attacks that target this unit. Okay? That's pretty nice. You don't want your units to get shot. Well, you don't want your hero to get shot before it gets into battle. But then one that I love is Amulet of Screams, which allows you to make a reaction to your opponent declaring a spell ability for a wizard within 18 inches of this unit. This does mean you're going to be able to do this in every hero phase, which is nice, but not multiple times like in one hero phase. What you do is you roll a d3. On a 2+, you inflict an amount of mortal damage on the caster equal to the roll. If the target is destroyed by this ability, you do not resolve the spell effect. Now, when I say that doing d6 mortal damage is rare, it's unbelievably rare that I've seen. You've even got Mega Gargants doing d3 mortal wounds on the charge. The fact that, this is a roll of d3. In fact, I've got this wrong. I apologize. You are only doing d3 mortal damage potentially with this, but that's still pretty effective against a bunch of enemy units and spellcasters, and they're going to really stress about casting spells when they're in range of you. But it is only a d3. I was pretty hype. I thought it was d6. If it was d6, it would be crazy, but as d3, it's still really good. And of the 3, it's my favorite. On your army list, you'll also choose a spell lore, and this is going to give you access to 3 different spells: Vial Transference, Prison of Grief, and Waste Away. When you choose a spell lore, all of the wizards that you have in your army can cast any of those spells. Each one of those spells can only be cast once per hero phase, unless it's got the unlimited keyword like Vial Transference, in which case every wizard in your army can cast it in that hero phase. I hope that helps with how unlimited spells work. And Vial Transference is an absolutely dope spell. It's cast on a 7. You pick an enemy unit within 18 inches of the caster. You roll a number of dice equal to the number of models in the target unit. For each 6, you inflict 1 mortal damage on the unit. If any enemy models are slain, then you heal D3. So if you're in a situation where you really need to heal your caster, guess what? You're going to pick a unit with loads of models. If you're just looking to ping a couple of mortal damage potentially onto one of the really effective elite units, with like 6 models in and a good armor save, then you'll cast this, maybe hoping to spike 2 or 3 6s. And then potentially get the heal. So this is nice because it's maybe apply some mortal damage and then do a heal, but then it's definitely apply some mortal damage if you're rolling against a lot of models, and then definitely get a heal. And this is super nice when we key it in already with the healing that you can find. If you're running like the skeletal side, where they can do some healing in the hero phase, or if you're running the vampire side, where they are doing some healing at the end of the turn. So this is adding another layer of healing. The next one is Prison of Grief, which is also cast on 7, and you pick an invisible enemy unit within 12 inches. That is that's within 12 inches of the caster, and that target has strike last until the start of your next turn. That's actually pretty devastating, because the way that works is if I cast that in my turn, then that means it's going to apply for my turn, their turn, and then if there's a priority roll and they get the double turn, which means they're also not choosing a battle tactic, they still have strike last. So that's going to be shutting down an enemy unit, especially an enemy combat unit, for potentially three turns, which is crazy that it lasts that long. And we already know we have access to another strike last, so that's good. And the final one is Waste Away, where it's again cast on a 7. You pick a friendly Soulblight Gravelords wizard to cast it, and you pick a visible enemy unit within 12 inches to be the target. For the rest of that turn, you subtract 1 from the damage characteristic of the target's melee weapons. So if you're looking to go into a really tough enemy unit and you want them to hit you back much worse than they normally would, then -1 to wound is great. Because it only lasts till the end of the turn, you might want to use the command ability to cast a spell in your opponent's turn to cast it on them then, especially if they're planning to charge you. But you might also want to decide to cast Strike Last on them, which is even more devastating. It depends on which one. The fact that you have both is great. You're shutting down combat abilities all over the place here. I think that's very... -1 from the damage characteristic. You're not -1 to wound. -1 from the damage characteristic is what you get on Waste Away. So that's really good, because you're going to make units that are damage 2 down to damage 1. That's super good on Waste Away. Prison of Grief is really good. Vial Transference is really good. 3 great spells. Don't forget you're in a subfaction. You have a subfaction that gives you +1 to cast. In addition to the spell lore, for free on your army list, you're also able to choose a manifestation lore. Soulblight Gravelords don't have their own unique manifestation lore, like you see with some of the armies, like Slaanesh have their own unique one, and instead there are all of the generic manifestation laws that you're able to choose from. I will be making a separate video about those in the future. The first hero that we're going to look at is a unique hero called Mannfred Von Carstein, or as most people know from the Warhammer Fantasy Battle days, the little old bitch. Anyway, Mannfred is a unique monster, which means unique model means that he's not, you can't take multiples of him in an army list. And he's a great piece. He's got 14 health with a 3-up save, moves 12 inches, which is good. Exactly what you want out of a melee unit. You want fast mobility to be able to charge the places that you want and have big threat range. Control value 5, which is good for helping contest objectives. And in combat, he's also got a 6-up ward save. He's got 6 attacks, 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage 2, and 5 attacks, 4s and 2s, rend 3, damage 3 with his mount. Now, Mannfred is also a caster, which is really great, a level 2 wizard, which means you have an incredibly fast, mobile, pretty tanky fighting unit that's also a caster. And can cast 2 of those spells, which is great because you're also going to want manifestations. In addition to this, he's also a vampire, which means if he's in combat, if he's in combat, he can get +1 to wound. If he's out of combat, he can get +1 to cast. Both of those are great buffs for this unit because they apply both times. Also got the fly keyword to be able to move over units. It's also got the War Master keyword you can see over there. That means that he has to be your general in your army. If you have multiple War Masters, you get to choose which one of those is your general. The general only bonus to your army is that their regiment, which is how you build lists, can have 4 units in it as opposed to 3. That's what he does. So really good at moving around, surviving, and fighting. But his fighting gets even stronger because he has an ability that you can do in any combat phase, once per turn across the army. You can do in any combat phase where if this unit charges turn, you roll a dice on a 3+, this unit has strike first for the rest of the turn. That's incredibly impressive because this means, especially if you use the counter charge ability, which lets you use charge abilities in your opponent's turn, then that means this guy can be striking before their opponent and hitting. And the output is fine. I'm not saying he's the best fighting unit in the game, but his output is good. Striking first is even better. The way striking works, or the combat phase works, because I should explain this, is in every single combat phase, your opponent or the active person will do all of their combat abilities. You will do all of your combat phase abilities, and then you'll start doing fight abilities. And the fight abilities are broken down into 3 steps. Strike first, strike at the medium level, and strike last. So now we have strike last in the army from a spell and also from an artifact. And we've also got strike first from this guy. So that means we can really affect who gets to choose when, who gets to fight in the combat phase. Lovely. Pretty great start, but we can go even deeper because he's got a passive, the Sword of Unholy Power. If this unit has slain an enemy models this turn, for the rest of the turn, you can add one to the attacks characteristic of melee weapons used by Death Rattle and Deadwalker zombies, Deadwalker units, while they're wholly within 12 inches. And because he's got strike first, then that means he potentially can strike first, kill a few models, and then the units below him in the step who are striking at the normal level are going to be able to get +1 to their attacks characteristic. +1 to your attacks characteristic is really good. We also know we could potentially take these in a sub-faction where you would get +1 charge on the rend if you outnumber the enemy unit, but you're probably going to take the +1 to cast one. But still, +1 attack is really great, especially on Graveguard and Black Knights. Not lastly, he also has another ability which is a reaction to you declaring a redeploy command for a Soulblight Gravelords unit. Redeploy is a command ability that you use in your opponent's movement phase. Your opponent will do all of their movements and then you'll use redeploy. When you use redeploy, you can move D6 inches anywhere on the board, but you cannot move into combat. This removes that stipulation and it allows you to redeploy into combat. And that is pretty aggressive because this means that you are going to be able to move into your opponent's combat range, basically shutting down their charges. This is pretty scary for your opponent, meaning they're always going to have to stay 6 inches away from your units. Otherwise, they're not going to get their charge bonuses. Lastly, he has his own unique spell called Wind of Death, which is cast on a 7, where you pick a point on the battlefield within 18 inches of the caster and pick up to 3 visible enemy units within 6 inches of that point. You roll a d3 for each target, and on a 2+, you inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. So he's also got an AoE mortal wound damage, which is, AoE mortal wound damage, which is super good, very effective. Maybe if you took the Amulet and Screams, you could maybe kill a hero with that in a kind of combo. This is very nice. And also, everyone is correct. When you do need to, with the redeploy ability, your opponent's basically going to have to stay 9 inches away because it's 6 inches away because that's how far you can move, and 3 inches because of how long your combat range is. So the Mortarch of Night ability in the redeploy is basically going to control huge swaths of the board because guess what? Your opponent really wants to charge you. So it means you're going to be able to use your smaller infantry units or smaller chaff units to just basically move block them, which is like mega murder lust, which is really good. I would say that this guy is stunning, and I could see a use for him in any army that I've reviewed yet, and probably any army I'd review in the future. Really good, incredibly techy, 2-cast wizard that can fight, heal, support his army with plus attacks, and do murder lust. He's got like 4 allegiance abilities built into his war scroll. Love this guy. The next unique hero that we're going to look at is Neferata, the Mortarch of Blood. She's also a support piece while also being a 2-cast level wizard that's also a bit of a combat powerhouse. For survivability, Neferata has got 14 health with a 3-up save and has got a 6-up ward save, and as we already know, it's got the vampire keyword, so it's going to be able to heal at the end of every turn when it's used a fight ability. Also, it's got the fly keyword, which in addition to its 12-inch move means it's going to be able to move around the board pretty sharpish and also charge in places where maybe you're trying to screen out against. It's unique, so you can only take one Neferata and is a War Master, and as applies, the War Master ability applies like the other War Masters I'm going to talk about. This army is full of War Masters, apparently, and has got that very important vampire keyword. Okay, so the combat profile is 5 attacks with Akhmet Ha, 3 attacks with Akan Seth. Akhmet Ha, the 5 attacks, is Ren 2, and against heroes it's Ren 3, which is pretty spicy, but it's only damage 1. And then the Mount has got 5 attacks, which are damage 3 at Ren 3, which is pretty wild. So the special, one of the reasons you maybe would bring Neferata is because in the deployment phase, you can use the Mortarch of Blood ability where you pick up to 3 friendly Death Rattle Infantry or Deadwalker Infantry units. Each target can use a normal move ability as if it were your movement phase. These are what we would call pre-game moves. This is particularly good for holding objectives because you're going to be able to potentially start what we call capping objectives very early. These pre-game moves are also pretty important because your opponent might aggressively move up the board and you can get a cheeky counter charge in while being further away. It also produces a bigger zone and or screen against deep strikes and alpha strike charging armies, which is really nice. It's only infantry units though, so you're not going to be able to push up a big unit of, let's say, Black Knights at the beginning of the game. She also has the ability, the Adavore, which you use once per turn at the end of every turn. And then you pick an enemy hero that was allocated any damage points inflicted by this unit's Akhmet Ma this turn to be the target. On a 5-up, poof, it's just dead. Automatically destroyed, which is an incredible ability. So she can effectively run around and try to snipe heroes. What's nice is, obviously, if you got into combat, you can split your attacks. Put all 5 of Akhmet Ha onto a hero, and they've only damaged 1, and then put all the other attacks into a unit you're trying to chew up to for some objective control. And you still got that ability to 5-up and just take it off the board at the end, which is nice. She also has the passive Twilight's Alert, where you subtract 1 from hit rolls for combat attacks that target friendly Soulblight Gravelords units where they're wholly within 6 inches of this unit. That's going to apply to all Soulblight Gravelords units, which is really good, especially against some of the monstrous units that we've seen out there, because they're mainly hitting on 4s. That does mean that they're going to be hitting on 5s, and they're going to be wildly ineffective. So that's actually an amazing buff, to be honest. And then lastly, she has her own unique spell because she's a 2-cast wizard. So she's going to be able to cast the spell that potentially does mortal damage and does heals, or, you know, strike last on a unit, or reduce the damage down by 1. So just Neferata on her own can be like, do you know what, you're -1 to hit units around me, and I've cast a spell on you in your turn so that you're -1 damage on some of your melee weapons. That's pretty impressive, to be honest. But her spell, Dark Mist, is even more impressive as a support piece for her army, where you pick a visible non-monster Soulblight Gravelords unit, wholly within 12 inches unit to be the target. You ignore modifiers to save rolls for the target, positive and negative. The reason this is super important is because if you have a very high armor save unit, and I'm specifically looking at Blood Knights more than likely, of a 3-up save, this means that you're not going to be able to apply Rend. It's not very good on like a 5-up save unit because you might want to add +1 to its armor save. Now, if you're up against an enemy army that's got a lot of really good Rend, then you're going to pop this on your Blood Knights. That means that Neferata is a pretty interesting piece because while her spell benefits Blood Knights, and narrative that makes sense as well, she's also a hero assassin while also being a unit that helps your army survive longer and also gives you some pre-game move for specifically Death Rattle Infantry and Deadwalker Infantry. So she might be the perfect centerpiece for a very mixed arms force, using some Death Rattle Infantry, maybe using some Blood Knights, and really mixing and matching those abilities. I really like her. I think she's really good, super interesting. Going to be very good and situational if Blood Knights ends up being really good. So yeah, she's cool. The next unit we're going to look at is also unique, and this is Prince Vhordrai. He's a named vampire lord on a zombie dragon, and he's so crazy good for a bunch of different reasons. Number one, he's got 16 health with 3 up save and a 6 up ward save, and obviously the vampire keyword for all of that tasty, tasty healing. He's definitely going to be able to do a lot of fight abilities and also kill some units, because he's got an amazing attack profile. The Blood Lance, which Vhordrai himself is carrying, has got 6 attacks, 3s and 3s, Rend 2, damage 2, but has got +1 damage on the charge, taking 6 attacks, damage 3, which is pretty spicy. His mount has got 3 attacks, damage 3, and also with the claw attacks, another 7 attacks, damage 2, putting him right up there with some of the output on some of the biggest monster characters. He's also a level 1 wizard, so a little less effective in the spellcasting department as the Mortarks. It's unique, obviously can only take 1, and has also got fly on a massive base though to run around. As a wizard, he's able to cast one spell, cast a spell, and he also has a unique spell, and if he casts that spell, which is cast on a 7, this unit is going to have strike first until the start of your next turn. That's an incredibly effective long-term buff with strike first. It means even if your opponent is charging you, you're going to strike before them. So that's going to be an ability that you're going to want to use all the time. Now, in addition to that, in combat, at the end of any combat phase, he's got a rampage, which you can do once per turn. If this unit charges turn, pick an enemy unit in combat with it on a 4-up, you do that much mortal damage. So this does mean that, unlike the roll a d3, 2+ do d3 mortal damage, this is either going to do 4, 5, or 6 mortal damage. So it's either going to have a massive effect or very little effect. Now, as well as like a solo combat piece, which definitely is what he definitely is a force multiplier for a very specific army build, which I think, again, is orientated around Blood Knights. Or maybe a Skirgan Trueblades. At the end of any turn, you can use the Saint of Slaughter ability, where you pick a friendly non-monster vampire unit that destroyed a unit this turn using a fight ability wholly within 12 inches of this unit to be the target. You pick one of the following effects to apply for the rest of the battle. You add 2 inches to the move characteristic, you add 1 to the attacks characteristic of the target's melee weapons, or you add 1 to the damage characteristic of the target's melee weapons. More than one effect can apply to a unit, but at the same time, however, each effect can only apply to a unit once. This feels like a bit of a no-brainer to put on 10 Blood Knights, because eventually you'll be adding +1 attack to all of them, and also +1 to their damage, which is pretty stunning, to be honest. What's super interesting about this is you can have multiple Blood Knight units and then keep applying this buff, because it's the end of any turn. So you could really ramp up the effectiveness of those units, which I think is really interesting. So overall, Vhordrai has got to be very expensive when it turns out. He's also got D6 shooting attack, which for some reason is damage 2. I didn't think it was worth mentioning, but that is also insane. There are shooting units that don't have a shooting profile as good as that, to be honest. But this guy is great. Obviously, is going to be expensive and is also going to be really useful as a force multiplier. The only negative, if there is one, not that I'm looking for one, is that he's a level 1 wizard versus being a level 2 wizard. But I think Vhordrai slaps and is really, really good. The non-named version of a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, obviously with Vhordrai being the named version, is the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. With 16 health, 3 up save, 6 up ward save, it's also a level 1 wizard. Doesn't have its own unique spell and has got a pretty similar damage profile to Vhordrai, but not as good. Still got that good shooting attack. It's got 4 attacks with its weapon at damage 2 with +1 damage on the charge. Draconic Claw more with 3 damage and 7 attacks with 2 damage. So it's just basically the same attack profile. It's only got 2 abilities on its War Scroll, one of which is a passive, that which should not be, where if this unit charges turn for the rest of the turn, subtract 1 from the control scores of enemy units while they're in combat with this unit. That's a pretty minimal effect. And the other one is once per turn at the end of any turn, called Bloodthirsty Dominance, where if this unit charges turn, you pick an enemy in combat with it to be the target, roll a number of dice equal to the target's health characteristic, for each 6 you do a mortal wound. Ultimately, this is nowhere near as good as all of the amazing things that Vhordrai can bring. The only reason you would take this is because it can take a heroic trait and an artifact, neither of which I think make this any better than Vhordrai. Vhordrai is like a massive force multiplier, as well as having strike first, which seems to be the key element of this army, strike first, strike last, which is pretty good. So unfortunately, I can't argue for this, so just do Vhordrai instead and have a better time. The next unit we're going to look at is Lauka Vai, or the next hero we're going to look at is Lauka Vai. She is a monster and is also like a monster support piece. With 11 health, a 4-up save, and a 6-up ward save. I wouldn't necessarily describe it as a frontline melee character that's going to survive forever, but does have the vampire keyword at the bottom, so is going to be able to heal at the end of every turn, which is pretty nice if she's used a fight ability. In the fight phase, got 5 attacks that are damage 2 and Rend 2, and then 3 attacks which are Rend 3, damage 3. So that's quite an impressive profile. The Rend, the to hit and the to wound are pretty good. She has her own unique passive called Nightmare's Miasma, where you subtract 1 from the Rend characteristic of melee weapons used by enemy units while they're in combat with this unit. So you can, we've already know that there's a -1 to hit bubble. We've got some strike last stuff, minus to damage spells as well. -1 from the Rend could be very effective in the right situation. And then she has her own unique rampage called Impaling Talons, which you do in any combat phase. If this unit charged, you pick an enemy unit in combat with it, you roll a dice, and if the roll is equal to or less than the target's health characteristic, you inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. So this is obviously really good against monsters, but not very good against infantry. But if you are fighting a monster, it means you've got potential to do up to d6 mortal damage, which is pretty nice, and maybe that's going to help with her additional damage she has up here. I also said she's a wizard, but she's a level 1 wizard, and you're really looking for level 2s, I think, at the moment. And her unique spell is the Queen's Diktat, which is cast on a 6, or Dictate, or something like that, where you pick a visible friendly Soulblight Gravelords monster wholly within 12 inches. You pick one of the target's companion weapons. Companion is a keyword that you'll normally see in the ability line at the top here. After you see the attack line, you'll see the ability line, and then that will have companion keyword. Normally, they can't be modified, but this spell lets you add D3 to the attack's characteristic of that weapon for the rest of the turn. So if you're able to have a really good fighting monster, like Neferata or Mannfred, for instance, their companion attacks are pretty decent, then you can be able to add D3 to them, or something like a zombie dragon or a Terrorgeist, being able to improve their companion weapons will be really good as well. So a pretty interesting character that feels like it's designed around using monsters and fighting monsters. The next unit is a Vengorian Lord. This is a non-unique version of Lauka Vai, and it's got a similar stat line with 11 health, a 4-up save, moves 10 inches, it's got a 6-up ward save to add to the survivability, as well as the vampire keyword, which means obviously you could do that healing that we talked about earlier. It's also got control value 5, so along with Lauka Vai, you could be jumping onto objectives and adding a lot of control score to control those objectives, and it's fairly quick. I wouldn't say it's got an incredible stat line when it comes to combat, with 4 attacks that are damage 2 and 3 attacks that are damage 3. So describing it as a frontline fighting unit is a little bit of an overstatement when it's also not that survivable compared to the other units that you have in this book. But hopefully it should be much cheaper than, than Prince Vhordrai. It does have a couple of abilities. Number 1, Nightmare's Miasma. It shares with Lauka Vai, where you subtract 1 from the Rend characteristics of melee weapons used by enemy units while they're in combat with this unit. That ability will not stack with the same named ability. And at the end of any turn, you can use Festering Feast, where you pick a visible, friendly, non-hero Soulblight Gravelords monster that destroyed an enemy unit this turn and that is wholly within 12 inches. You can heal 6 to the target. So it very much feels like you're going to take Lauka Vai and a Vengorian Lord, and you're going to use those to help bigger monsters out. What's interesting about that is that's the end of any turn, which means you could potentially do this multiple times with 2 different Vengorian Lords to different monsters. Not to the same monster, but to different monsters, which is pretty fun. And lastly, it's got its own unique rampage, which you can do in any combat phase. And if this unit charges its turn, you can pick an enemy unit in combat and roll a dice. On a 3-up, roll a dice for each one of the target unit. For each 5+, inflict a mortal damage on the target. So this is like a triple situational ability where you have to have charged, then you have to roll a 3-up, and then you need to roll a dice for each one of the unit. And on a 5-up, do mortal damage. And obviously, that's great against a horde or even like, a 10-man kind of elite unit. But it's a triple situation. You might end up getting bogged up in combat. You've got a pretty good health characteristic, so you're going to be able to power through quite easily, which is a command ability you can do at the end of the turn. But ultimately, I think the Vengorian Lord is fighting for its place as a melee character, along with the other melee characters, and the others just seem better, and they do more for their army. But I think you would use this in a monster build. The next unique hero that we're going to look at is a foot hero called Radukar the Wolf. It's one of two versions of Radukar, with it also being Radukar the Beast, which we'll talk about next. Radukar the Wolf has got 7 health with a 4-up save and moves 6 inches. I think describing him as a frontline melee character would be a little bit of an over-description, with only 5 attacks that do have crit mortals, but that are damaged too. I really would have loved to have seen 7 or 8 attacks. Games Workshop hate foot characters for some reason. But his role, as well as being maybe one of the best models ever made, is to be a support piece to the rest of your army. And it's a pretty good support piece. He has a passive called Call to the Hunt, where if this unit charges turn, for the rest of the turn, you add 1 to wound rolls for combat attacks made by friendly Death Rattle, Dead Walker, or Vikos Bloodborne units where they're holding within 12 inches. Obviously, it's going to combo really well with Mannfred, who can give +1 attacks to units within range. So +1 attacks, +1 to wound. You can start to really build up a doom lozenge, to quote my friend Owen and my friend Dan, who build these like kind of bubbles of buffs to do all this additional damage. Also is a wizard, a level 1 wizard, as well as being able to cast the amazing spell lore spells or pop a manifestation out. You can cast Master of the Pack, which is a unique War Scroll spell, which is cast on a 6. If you successfully cast it, until the start of your next turn, you can reroll charge rolls for friendly Soulblight Gravelords infantry units where they're wholly within 12 inches of this unit. That's not bad. Reroll charge rolls is good for units that definitely want to get into the charge. +1 to wound, you're going to have to work out if that's important enough to attempt to get this guy in, but it is situational. It's if this unit charged, you get +1 to wound. So there's a lot of like situational benefits from this support piece. Looks great. Not sure how I feel about it. Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the comments. You're like, yeah, Rob, this is absolutely what I'm going to take. The other version of Radukar the Beast is Radukar the Beast, a much more powerful version of Radukar that's got 12 health and is also unique, so you can only have 1. 12 health, 4-up save, 6-up ward save, vampire keyword for the healing, and is a level 1 wizard. Has got the massive control value of 5, so going to be great for holding objectives, and is also a monster. Is great in combat with 6 attacks, 3s and 3s, Rend 2, damage 3, and it also means that you're going to do critical mortal damage. The Vikos Bloodborns, which come with it, have also got an additional 6 attacks, which are damage 2, which is really good. Those Vikos Bloodborns have got more attacks than Radukar, the other version. So this is a good combat profile for this character. Much more killy than the Vengorian Lords. It's got the passive Call to the Hunt, which is the same as the other Radukar, where if this unit charges turn, which you definitely want to do, you add 1 to the wound rolls for the combat attacks made by friendly Death Rattle, Dead Walker, and Vikos Bloodborne units while they're wholly within 12 inches. And we love +1 to wound. You cannot run both versions in an army. I should clear that up. You cannot run both versions of Radukar. Now, the reason that you would take this guy is because he's a great level 1 caster that's also a pretty good combat power piece. But in addition, he's got this really dynamic mechanic called the Beast Will Out. And once per turn, at the end of any turn, which means every turn, if this unit is not in combat, it can make a D6 move. It can move D6 inches, and it can move into combat. This is a really powerful ability because it means you're going to be able to move into your opponent's units when maybe their turn is about to happen and they're going to want to move somewhere else and fight. This is also going to work really well in conjunction with the Power Through command ability. At the end of the turn, what will happen is the active player will do any of their end of turn abilities and you'll do any of yours. You'll be able to do the command ability Power Through, which means as long as you've got a lower wounds characteristic or you're fighting a unit with a lower wounds characteristic, you'll be able to move past them. And maybe out of combat, you can even move and stay in combat, but you can't go into another unit and get in combat with those. What's cool about this is this means you're going to be able to power through and then also use this ability because you can use all of your abilities at the end of any turn and then move into combat, which means you could move out of a unit that you don't want to be fighting and move into an enemy unit that you do want to be fighting, like an enemy support piece, maybe a piece of terrain, maybe a manifestation, or any of those other things. It's a great ability. Lastly, he's got his own unique spell called Armor of the Night. Cast on a 6, and you subtract 1 from hit rolls and wound rolls for attacks that target this unit until the rest of the turn. That's going to make this character, this unit, much more survivable. -1 to hit, -1 to be wounded. It's got a good health value, good armor save, a little bit of a cheeky ward save, level 1 wizard. It's got that crazy ability at the end of any turn. I think Radukar the Beast will see a lot of play. The next hero, and this is not even half the heroes, is Belladamma Volga with 9 health, moves 8 inches, and has got a 4-up save and a control value of 5, which is pretty important because it's going to be good for controlling objectives. It's going to help other units control objectives as well. Importantly, she's a 2-cast wizard, which is great, and I assume she's fairly cheap, which would be nice because a good, cheap 2-cast wizard in your army is going to be really beneficial. She definitely integrates really well with direwolves thanks to her unique spell Under a Killing Moon, which is cast on a 7. You pick up to 3 visible direwolf units wholly within 18 inches. And for the rest of the turn, you add one to their Ren's characteristic, which is great. And the targets can ignore the effect of the Beast ability. The Beast ability means that the units, the unit of direwolves would only be a control score of 1. A control score is made up of the cumulative value of the control, the control statistic, and however many models are in that unit. So direwolves, for example, might have the control score of 1, and if you had 10 of them, they would be 10 on an objective normally, but thanks to the Beast ability, they're only going to be a control score of 1. Removing that restriction means direwolves will see probably a lot more play. Removing that restriction on 3 different units is super good. Yeah, I think that that's really nice. But that is only going to apply for the rest of the turn. Where this gets super spicy is if you use this to make a unit of direwolves ignore it, go and grab an objective, then you are definitely going to have to cast it in your opponent's hero phase to stop them scoring again. Otherwise, you're going to go from potentially a control value of 20, if you've got 20 direwolves, down back to a control value of 1. But it also means you can spring up and down those numbers by choosing different direwolf units. Let's say there are 4 objectives, and I have a unit of 20 direwolves on each one. I don't know how many they cost. This is just a situation. What I could do in my turn is be like, bang, I'm going to choose these 3 and grab those objectives. And then in your turn, after you've done all your moving, you've done all your fighting, well, not after you've done all your moving, in the hero phase, I can elect 3 different units, and I can kind of change where my control values are in my army. That's actually pretty clever and could be really dynamic, but it does require you to take a lot of direwolves, which is quite spicy. Anyway, I know I've gone on a lot about that, but it's actually quite a dynamic ability, so it's more fun than it seems. She also has the Wolf Guard ability, where this unit has a 4-up ward save as long as it's near a unit of direwolves. However, every time you make a successful ward roll, you put a mortal damage onto that unit of direwolves, and that unit can't make a ward save for it. Lastly, she has a passive called the First of Vhordrai, where you add 3 to the control score of friendly Radukar the Wolf, Radukar the Beast, Ivya Volga, Lady Annika, Kritza, and Vrika's Bloodborne and Varskir units, where they're wholly within 18 inches of this unit. +3 on Radukar the Beast is really good. To be honest, in my personal opinion, makes him control value 8, which is pretty spicy. But some of the other characters, it's also really interesting on as well as the Varskir and the Vrikros Bloodborne. I'm definitely mangling these. So I really like Belladamma Volga. She's really interesting, especially if you want to paint up a load of direwolves. Really cool model, really engaging rules. The next unique character, which also has got that Vrikros keyword as well as being a vampire, is the level 1 wizard, unique hero, Ivya Volga, the Outcast. And she is, as well as being a wizard, an amazing piece of anti-monster technology. Got 5 health with a 5-up save, so a little bit squishy, could get stomped on. Has got an odd shooting attack with the Bat Swarm that does 2d6 attacks, 4s and 4s, no rend damage 1, but does shoot into combat. Has got 5 attacks in close combat that's damage 2 and it's got rend 2 against a monster, otherwise it's rend 1. It's -1 to hit if you do target this model, which is going to make it a little bit more survivable, but has got 2 incredible abilities. The first one, Behemoth's Bane, is a passive where subtract 2 from the attack characteristic of enemy monsters, melee weapons, while they're in combat with this unit. This will devastate Gargant armies, devastate Archeon, and a bunch of other very strong units. This might get FAQ to be in monsters' companion weapons or even companion weapons, but if it stays as monsters, it's wild. In addition, you have Total Dominance, which is cast on a 6, which is its unique spell, where if you cast this spell for the rest of the turn, you subtract 5 from the control score of enemy monsters while they're within 12 inches of this unit. Most monsters in this game only have a control score of 5, with some unique units having slightly more. Therefore, you're going to be able to score better. And if you run this along with Belladamma, you're going to be adding +3 to Ivya's control score. So she's going to be control 5, while monsters only within 12 inches are going to be -5, which is pretty stonky. So Ivya Volga is Really good, but very squishy. Can die very, very easily. The next unique character, a vampire lord, is Kritza the Rat Prince. And this is absolutely worth picking up because this is the biggest meme character I've seen so far. He's not survivable. He's got 5 health and a 5-up save and moves 6 inches. The Rat Prince got a 6-up ward save and is unique, therefore we can only take one of him. But why is he so good? Well, let me tell you. He has the ability he's got 5 attacks that do damage too, but that's not why he's there. He's literally there to dart in and dart out. The reason that he's good is because he's got the Verminous Court ability you can do in any combat phase, which means every combat phase, where you pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit to be the target, then pick an artifact of power that target has. Those artifacts of power we talked about earlier. On a 3+, the target no longer has the artifact of power. You just steal it forever. Amazing, especially if some artifacts of power are game-defining. But you're like, oh, Rob, then he's going to get hit in combat. Well, no, because he can do another ability, and you do these abilities in the combat phase before you're doing any fighting, where in any combat phase, if this unit is in combat, you roll a dice, and on a 2-up, this unit can immediately use the retreat ability as if it were your movement phase without any mortal damage being inflicted. Hilarious. So fun. Love this to pieces. This is great. What a great unit. Is it going to be game-winning? No. Is it incredibly fun? And you could just be like, I'm going to an event this weekend, and I'm going to steal artifacts. That's all. You can just have your own personal little journey with this. This is stunning stuff. Love it to pieces. Great. Our other unique vampire, your hero, so only one of them, is Lady Annika, the Thirsting Blade, that's got 5 health, 5-up save, pretty weak source, but a 4-up ward save. Totally brought it back. You thought she was out, she's back. Moves 6 inches and has got a pretty good attack profile with 7 attacks, hitting on 3s. Don't forget, we'll have +1 to wound in the vampire subfaction. Rend 1, damage 2. Is not a wizard. It's not a wizard. Now, you can put this unit into Deep Strike with the supernatural speed ability. Put this unit, during the deployment phase, you can put this unit into Deep Strike, say it's lying in wait. Then in your movement phase, or one of your movement phases, if this unit is lying in wait, you can set up this unit wholly within enemy territory and more than 9 inches from all enemy units. Okay, Rob, well, why do I care about any of that? Well, at the end of any turn, which means the end of every turn, you can use the Kiss of the Blade Proboscian, where you pick an enemy unit that was allocated any damage points inflicted by this unit's combat attacks this turn. And if you have done that, you roll a dice. On a 2-up, you subtract 1 from the save rolls for the target for the rest of the battle. Rest of the battle. Amazing. Go in. Boop, boop. No, -1 save for you. Amazing. And then if she survives, go do it to another unit. Just keep taking -1 save off all the units. Amazing. Love this. This is great. More vampire characters. Amazing. Another unique character is Kado Ezechiar, the Hollow King. Got a whole book written about him. This is a level 1 caster melee unit with 6 health and a 4-up save and a 6-up ward save. Moves 6 inches, although that can change. Has got 5 attacks in close combat, 3s and 3s. Rend 2, pretty nice. Damage 2 with critical auto wound. You have an ability that you can do in your hero phase called the Court of the Lost, where you roll a dice, and on a 2-up, you pick one of the following effects to apply until the start of your next turn. This unit has a move characteristic of 12 inches. Add 1 to the casting rolls, unbinding rolls, and banishment rolls for this unit. Now, that's really nice when you take it in the sub-faction, because he's a vampire who can do healing at the end of every turn, who can also, in the sub-faction, get +1 to cast. So it's +2 to cast some really important spells. I like that. This unit's melee weapons have, or if you don't want to choose that, then you can have crit mortals on your weapons. So move 12, +1 to bind, +1 to cast. Unbinding is rare. +1 to unbinding is really rare. +1 to banishment is also rare as well. And then he's got his own unique spell, which is cast on a 7, where you can pick a visible unit within 12 inches of this unit to be the target. If the unit is an enemy, you could do D3 mortal damage. If the unit is Death Rat or Deadwalkers, then you're -1 to wound that unit. I'm not sure I'm too bothered about Death Rattle or Deadwalkers being -1 to wound, depending. Maybe Graveguard could be a pretty fun example of something I am bothered about, because they're more unique, they're more elite, and I do want to keep them alive. So yeah, Kado's an interesting choice. Let me know what you think about Kado. Obviously, he's unique. You can only take one of him. Vampire for the healing. A level 1 wizard, which is pretty spicy. Yeah, I guess 40 zombies -1 to wound. That's a great shout. I guess I'm not really thinking about it. Yeah, because Battle Shock is gone now. 40 wounds that are -1 to be wounded. Pretty good. There is also, you know, if you took this and Neferata, who's got that -1 to hit bubble, then you've got a unit that's -1 to hit and -1 to wound that's probably very cheap to get a lot of wounds on the board with, which could make this really interesting. So maybe it's better than I think. Could be really cool. Let me know what you think. Next up is a non-unique Vampire Lord for once. The just aptly named Vampire Lord with 5 health, 3-up save, moves 6 inches, got 5 attacks that have got anti-hero rend 1, taking up to rend 2 again, and then damage 2. Got crit 2 hits as well, so you could spike really big. It's also a level 1 wizard with a 6-up ward save, so might be you know, a cheap little wizard that you could have in your army for doing spellcasting, but has got this really unique ability that you can do once per turn in your army. So if you have multiple vampire heroes, you won't be able to do it. And it's called Sanguine Blur, where if you roll a dice on a 3-up, you remove this unit from the battlefield and set it up again on the battlefield more than 9 inches from all enemy non-hero units. And then within 3 inches, well, outside of 3 inches of all enemy heroes. So if a hero's out in a wild, teleport on a 3-up, go slap it. The important part is that it's a 3-up to do it. Your attack profile is pretty weak sauce, and all your other characters probably do a lot more, so probably Vampire Lord is not going to be for you. We'll see. The next named character is Torgillius the Chamberlain, who's got 5 health, a 6-up save, moves 5 inches, and a 6-up ward save, and is a level 1 wizard. A unique wizard, so only bring 1 Torgillius. He has a hilarious shooting attack, which is an incredible range of 18 inches, which is the same range as a Knight Judicator. 2d6 shots, 4s and 4s, rend 1 damage d3. The Familiar's Fangs and Claws have got 4 attacks, 4s and 4s, no rend damage 1. So not really built to be a combat unit, but for some reason it's a pretty okay shooting unit. It's D3 damage. It's hilarious. He's got a passive called Trusted Lieutenant, where when this unit uses the Deathly Invocation ability, even if a different friendly unit is already used at this turn, that's the ability to return models or do healing that's in your battle traits. He's also got his own unique spell, which is cast on a 6, called Failing Fortitude, where you pick a visible enemy unit within 18 inches of this unit to be the target, then make a casting roll of 2d6. Until the start of your next turn, subtract 1 from wound rolls for the target's attacks. So a -1 to wound spell, is also a wizard, has got a hilarious shooting attack, and can bring back more models, literally doubling the effectiveness of the heal mechanic in your army is amazing. The next unique vampire character is Sekhar, the Fang of Nulahmia, and is an incredibly unique unit and really interesting. Definitely something I'd think about picking up. 6 health with a 3-up save, has an innate 6-up ward save, and is a level 2 wizard. Don't forget, a level 2 wizard is super important. A Lord of Change is whatever many points a Lord of Change is for basically just being a fancy level 2. This is a level 2 that's built into a support combat character. So that is in addendum. Like, being a level 2 is so good in this game. So that's great. In combat, okay. 5 attacks at damage 2, and then 3 attacks which are damage D3. All of those are great. But I know what you're going to say to yourself, 6 health with a 3-up save, Rob, even though she's a vampire and can heal, still feels pretty, fragile. Well, she's got a passive called Serpentine Agility, where if the unmodified hit roll for any attacks that target this unit is a 1 to 4, then they're going to miss. So basically, this unit can only be hit on 5s and 6s. You can give up this ability, although I don't know why you would, in the combat phase with the Time Swallower's More ability, where you give up the ability, basically. Pick an enemy unit in combat. Unit cannot use Serpentine Agility for the rest of the battle, so that's why you give it up. Roll 2d6 for each target. If the roll exceeds the target's move characteristic, inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the difference between the roll and the move characteristic. So you could do this absolutely massive mortal wound explosion, which is really cool. So that is, again, impressive. But her spell may be one of the reasons that I like her the most, because it's cast on a 7, and you pick a visible enemy unit within 12 inches. Until the start of your next turn, which is a good long duration, This unit and any friendly Soulblight Gravelords units, while they're wholly within 6 inches of this unit, cannot be picked to be the target of abilities used by the target other than fight abilities. This means that you could shut down Belladamma, which is pretty good. I love that. That's really fun. You can shut down quite a lot of units because Belladamma would be used after this. You have to get within 12 inches, but this feels like a massive... this feels like a really good spell for shutting down your enemy's Death Stars, your enemy's units that has all these additional big bonuses that they use against your army. Shut down Rampages, shut down Nagash. Can't do Hand of Dust. That's pretty fun. So again, another unique unit, which is really interesting. You're going to have a really hard time picking a hero in Soulblight Gravelords. Next you're going to look at is the basic Necromancer. You're like, okay, I'm bored of a basic Necromancer. That's fine. He's a level 1 wizard with a 6-up ward save, only a 6-up armor save, and only 5 health. Why do I care? Well, you can give him a 4-up ward save if he's near a unit of Death Rattle or Dead Walkers, and anytime he makes a successful ward, you pass a mortal damage onto that unit that is nearby, and then you've got to be in combat range, which is 3 inches, and then they're not able to make ward saves on that. So that's fine. And then you can just be able to bring them back using your battle trait. That's great. So whatever. Oh, did I forget to say that he's got an ability called Van Hel's Dance Macabre. Not a spell, just an ability that he can do in your combat phase. So it's restricted to only your combat phase, and it's only once per turn. So if you have multiple Necromancers, it's not going to be usable multiple times. But you pick a friendly Death Rattle or Dead Walkers unit holding than 12 inches unit to be the target. And then you roll a dice, and on a 3-up, that target can use 2 fight abilities this phase. And after the first is used, however, the target has strike last. Now, normally that's a problem. However, we know that there's multiple ways to get strike last in this army on an enemy unit. And I know what you're thinking. I don't really care about zombies fighting twice or death rattle or like skeletons. Well, Graveguard, which is an amazing infantry combat unit, have got the death rattle keyword. So you can make them pile and attack twice. If you're near Mannfred, you can give them an extra attack, as well as all the other buffs that is potential to stack on those Graveguard. So you can absolutely go super bananas and fight twice. The next unit we're going to look at is the Mortis engine, which is now a hero and a level 1 wizard that can cast a spell. The Mortis engine has got 12 health with a 4-up save and can move 10 inches and doesn't have a particularly impressive combat profile, which is fine because its job is to do a ton of mortal damage in the shooting phase. The Nexus of Death energy passive that it has lets, when a friendly Death Rattle or Dead Walkers unit wholly within 12 inches unit is picked to be the target, you add D3 to the number of damage points that can be healed, or the combined health characters of the models can be returned, which does mean that you could potentially return really large models back, which is fun, or return loads of models back to units. 3 plus D3 is crazy as a passive, especially if you combine this with Torgillius, who's going to be able to make you do more Deathly Invocations. You can bring back absolutely loads of models to these guys and then do a rally, which lets you bring back more models. The Reliquary is a passive where if any successful casts are done by Soulblight Gravelords units while they're within 12 inches of this unit, you add 1 point to the stored energy to a maximum of 6. What you do with this is in your shooting phase and only once per turn, so you can't do this with multiple Mortis engines. You're able to do the Wave of Power shooting attack where you pick 3 enemy units within 10 inches of this unit to be the targets, roll a dice for each target, and on a 3+, you inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the value of this unit's stored energy, and then you turn it back to 1. That's pretty crazy. That's really realistically in the shooting phase about 12 mortal damage that you can do, which feels really nice as a bonus to being able to bring back absolutely tons of death rattle or dead walkers. Bring this if you want a horde of dudes. Next hero is Gorslav the Gravekeeper, another unique unit that you can only have 1 of. Not a combat character and also not a wizard. With 6 health and a 6-up save, he has a very unique and very specific role. He has a 4-up ward save thanks to being near in combat range within 3 inches of a unit of Dead Walker zombies. If you make any successful ward saves, you put 1 mortal damage onto them and they can't make a ward save. But the reason you take Gorslav is because of his Arise ability, where you pick up to 3 friendly Dead Walker zombie units holding within 12 inches of this unit to be the targets. Roll D3 for each target, and on a 2+, return a number of slain models to the target equal to the roll. So you add this up with all of the other healing that we've just talked about from Torgillius and also the Coven Throne, and you're going to get the Mortis engine. You're going to add a ton of models back specifically to Deadwalker zombies if you combo in that order. This is also really fun because this is done in your movement phase, so you can actually move with a zombie unit, return D3 models to the unit, which is going to extend how far, which means it's going to put you closer to your enemy for a charge roll, which is a pretty spicy trick. Next hero we're going to look at is the Coven Throne, which has got 12 health, a 4-up save, has got a control value of 5, which is really nice. And in combat, it's okay, with 5 attacks that are damage 2, and then a bunch of other attacks that do damage 1. The main reason you're going to take this, let's just jump straight in there, is because of this, Tactical Insight. Friendly Death Rattle and Deadwalker units have a 5-up ward save while they're wholly within 6 inches of this unit. That's nutty. That means those Deadwalkers that we're bringing loads of back, that we can make -1 to be wounded, we can make the enemy -1 to be wounded, we can just build these as having a 5-up ward save. So they're going to just be able to flood the board and hold these objectives in an absolute undead wave. Also got a passive called the Scrying Pool, where if a friendly Soulblight Gravelords unit wholly within 12 inches this unit uses redeploy, you can pick another friendly Soulblight Gravelords unit wholly within 12, and they can use redeploy as long as they haven't used a command ability, and you do not have to spend a command point for the second one. It's a level 1 wizard, and it's also a hero, but importantly, it gives out that 5-up ward save, which is the reason you're going to do it. And if a Coven Throne plus all the other ways that you can bring back units and models to units are applicable, then this thing is going to make it so that they're so survivable and so tanky. Itself is a vampire, so it's going to heal itself if it's able to kill any models in combat. So even if you end up getting trapped onto an objective fighting away, its control value is going to be valuable, its healing is going to be valuable. It's a great unit. The next unit is the Bloodseeker Palaquin, which again, like the other big tower models, it's got 12 health, 4-up save, moves 10 inches, control value 5. It's got those 5 attacks in close combat, and it's got all that good stuff. It's survivable with a 6-up ward save. In addition, got that vampire keyword, so if he gets into a fight, kills a model, it's going to start healing, which is pretty spicy. In addition, it's a wizard as well, which is cool for being able to pop all those spells. It's got this passive Wales of the Damned, where you subtract 3 from the control scores of any units while they're within 12 inches of this unit. But I think if you're going to really bring this unit, it's because of its once per battle in your combat phase ability to do a promising concoction, where where it picks up to 3 friendly vampire units wholly within 12 inches of this unit to be the target. You add 1 to the attacks characteristic of the target's melee weapons for the rest of the turn. This is going to combo incredibly well with any of the vampire models that we've discussed. Yeah, I don't know which ones it would be. Any of them at this point. Blood Knights feel like a great one. Skirgan True Blades. We already know that there's another way to get +1 attack on a vampire unit, so +2 attacks onto Blood Knights feels really decent as well. And just to be clear, if you are going to heal with a vampire, you just need this model to be in a fight, and have used a fight ability, you get to heal even more if you kill a unit with this particular model. So if you're going all Blood Knights, Neferata, Blood Knights, Bloodseeker, Palaquin, that's a very specific build, and I think this is going to be really good for it. Next unit is Watch Captain Halgrim, a unique hero, and he's a little bit of a death rattle skeleton fella. He's got a 6-up ward save, a 5 health pool, and a 4-up armor save. He's not very good in combat. He's got 4 attacks, hit on 4s, win on 3s, run 2, damage 2, but he does have crit mortals, which is quite fun. And he does have this disciplined advance, which I guess is the reason you take it, where each time you make a run roll for friendly death rattle skeletons that wholly within 12 inches, it can always be a 4, which isn't super impressive. And he's got another ability that when you declare to fight with him, a unit of death rattle skeletons can fight immediately after. But unlike some other abilities we've seen like this, you aren't going to get +1 to hit or +1 to wound. Instead, they just fight simultaneously. So not that impressed by Halgrim. Our next unit is like a death rattle hero as well, but this is a White King on Skeletal Steed and is not unique. Pretty good in a fight. 7 health with a 3-up save, and has got a 6-up ward save. His Tomb Lance is 4 attacks, hitting on 4s, which is sad, but wounds on a 3, rend 1, but is damage 3, and is damage 2, but damage 3 on the charge with crit mortals. He improves the charging of Death Rattle Cavalry because with the Lord of Trampling Bones, you add 1 to charge rolls for friendly Death Rattle Cavalry while they're wholly within 12 inches of this unit. And then he's got the Royal Companion's ability, which, like other abilities of its type, If he uses a fight ability that turn, he can choose a friendly death rattle cavalry that's in combat range, so within 3 inches of this unit, and that unit can fight at the same time or immediately after. So fight at the same step, which is quite fun. Don't forget those abilities never let a unit move up so if it's strike last, if the other unit is strike last, it's not going to be able to go from strike last into the medium step or in the normal activation step. Other than that, pretty fighty and adds +1 to charge rolls, which is good, especially if you want to guarantee those big charges with your Black Knights. The next unit is a White King on foot and is very similar to the White King on Skeletal Steed, where he's going to fight simultaneously with a unit of Death Rattle Infantry. But in this situation, when he does fight simultaneously with them, or he lets them fight immediately after them to be specific, you add 1 to the hit rolls for that target. So if he's cheap enough, you're going to charge him in with your unit of probably your unit of guard, with your unit of Grave Guard, and then they're going to give them +1 to hit, which is pretty nice. Are you just going to use a command ability instead? Probably. His survivability is 5 health on a 3-up save. The first unit we're going to look at, and that's right, ladies and gentlemen, we have finished Heroes for Soulblight Gravelords. The first unit we're going to look at is Deadwalker Zombies. These come as a unit of 20, and each model's got 1 health each with a 6-up save and a 6-up ward save. We already know that we can return loads of models back to this unit through loads of different healing, and if the unit even dies, you're going to be able to bring half the unit back. You also can give them a good ward save in addition to that. So you can this unit is meant to just life tank. You're meant to get a unit of 40 and just tank and return models and return models and return models and stand on objectives. They're fairly slow at movement 4, and they're obviously rubbish in combat, which is fine because they're not meant to be good in combat. They do have a single passive called Mindless Ferocity, where each time one of this unit is slain by an attack and that model is in combat with the attacking unit, you roll a dice. On a 6+, you inflict a mortal damage on the attacking unit. So the idea is that you just tank all of the damage, do mortals back, and start rezzing the unit back as fast as possible. We'll have to find out if it's going to be able to survive the test. Some units definitely aren't going to have the ability to just immediately wipe 40 damage into a unit, especially if they end up with a 5-up ward save. So super interesting unit, and they're definitely going to be stressing your opponent out in being able to contest objectives. But you might want to try and do some damage with your zombies, in which case you need to bring a corpse cart with you. It's got 7 health with a 6-up save, and it has got quite a few attacks with the zombies' Rusty's Blades, which aren't very good. But the reason that you're bringing the corpse cart is because it has the Locus of Undeath passive, where melee weapons used by friendly Deadwalker units have the critical auto wound while they're wholly within 12 inches. They do have a lot. They do have 1 attack each, I think, on those zombies. So I don't think this is going to be that impressive. And I think the zombies' job is just to stand there. So I think you could probably skip the corpse car, but some people might not. And you might be able to do an amazing build with corpse car and zombies. And if you can, let me know in the comments. The next unit I'm going to talk about are the Kusagi Night Guard. This is a really odd unit that came in Cursed City, where it's a unit of 2 models. Each model in the unit has got 4 health, and they have a 5-up armor save, and they have a 6-up ward save as base, but we'll talk about the ability to improve that in a minute. They move 6 inches, and each model in the unit has got 2 attacks. They hit on 4s, but they wound on a 2, they're rend 2, and they're damage 3. The important part about them is that they have the Deadwalkers keyword, which means you can do quite a lot of healing into this unit, and they're going to be able to benefit from a lot of buffs. For some reason, you give them auto wound, which I don't know why you would. You also are going to be able to probably heal, because it's a unit of 2. If you're going to be able to heal 1, or you're going to be able to bring 1 back from the dead pretty easily, especially if you bring someone like Torgillius along, I'm pretty certain. But the reason you would maybe bring these is if you're going to bring Radukar the Wolf or Radukar the Beast, if you do that, then while they're within this unit's combat range, this unit has a 5-up ward save. And also the other unit has a 5-up ward save. We already know Radukar the Beast is pretty great, and you might want to bring him anyway. So you can bring Radukar and the Kusagi Night Guard and have this kind of like death lozenge of units that are much more survivable and healable, but super fun. Next, we're going to talk about Death Rattle Skeletons. Death Rattle Skeletons come as a unit of 10 with 1 wound each and a 5-up base save. They also have a cheeky 6-up ward save, which is nice, and also a standard bearer. That's important. A musician. Do they have a musician? No, they only have a standard bearer. Okay. They've got 2 attacks each in combat, 4s and 4s, no rend, damage 1. But that is more attacks than the zombies. They're going to fulfill the same role as zombies in that they're going to be holding objectives. They have 1 special ability called Skeleton Legion, which you do at the end of any turn, which means the end of every turn, where you can return D3 slain models to the unit. That's going to be for every single Death Rattle Skeleton unit you have on the board. This is particularly good because you can put D3 models back on to an objective and potentially grab that objective off your opponent. However, you are going to be able to return a lot of models to this unit. I think me and the chat have worked out it's something along the lines of if you bring Torgillius and if you bring the Mortis engine, I think it's something like 6 plus 3d3 every turn back to a unit of skeletons. Because you can obviously reinforce this unit of skeletons up to a unit of 20. And you can do that same level of recursion to 3 different units, I'm pretty certain. So really good. And you can also use the rally command ability, which would be even more effective if there was a musician, but there isn't. So they stand on objectives, they do some attacks, they don't really kill anything, and then they never die. And if they do die, you bring the unit back to half strength, which is cool. So these are, in my opinion, very good. Next unit we'll look at are Graveguard. They're pretty good. You have a unit of 10 with 1 health each, and you can obviously reinforce them to a unit of 20. They have a 4-up armor save, and they move 4 inches. And they have a awesome combat profile. 2 attacks each with crit mortals, 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage 1. And they're each one, obviously, control 1. They only move 4 inches, though, so they're a little bit slower. Now, the important part is their keywords. Their keywords there show that they have the Death Rattle keyword. So all of the healing that we talked about with the Skeleton Warriors can also apply to the Graveguard, which is good. And you can also give them an additional attack from Mannfred. You can also make them pile in an attack twice from a Necromancer. So if you were just to take a Necromancer and also to take yourself a cheeky old Mannfred, then this unit of 20 that would be reinforced would mean that they have got 3 attacks per model, with 20 attacks, which is 60 attacks, which would be 3s and 3s. There is a way to get +1 to wound, and you can get +1 attack. Now, the sad news is it's rend 1, but thankfully you've got crit mortals. So that's 60 attacks with crit mortals. Any 6s to hit are going to do a mortal damage for 10 mortals. Then, if you have a good old fancy Necromancer nearby, he is going to be able to do Dance Macabre. On a 3-up, you're going to get to do those 60 attacks again, even though it's at this fight last step. However, thankfully, you do have a couple of ways to get Strike Last in this army, which is cool. And you can also get a way to get Death Rattle to have at least +1 rend. So it's just a cheeky, good old 120 attacks with the Graveguard, which is cool and fun. And if you're not picking up on my tone, insane. If you are a Soulblight player, you should be jumping for joy. Direwolves are a unit of 10 models with 2 wounds each and a 5-up armor save. Obviously, 2 health each. Sorry, 2 health each. 5-up save. And they move 10 inches, which is super fast. They have got 2 attacks each, 4s and 3s, no rend, damage 1, and they have a passive called On the Hunt, where this unit can use a run ability and still use a charge ability later in the turn. Now, they do have the Beast passive, and we did talk about this earlier when we talked about Belladamma and her ability to remove the Beast passive as well. You can reinforce this unit for an absolutely shocking amount of health on these guys, and the healing that you can do in this army isn't quite as good as on the 1 wound models like Skeleton Warriors, Zombies, and also Graveguard. But this is an incredibly fast, potentially mobile blocking pinning unit. So you would run up the board, charge into your opponent's army, pin them in, right? Pin them in, and then just make them say to them, can you get through 40 wounds while I'm grabbing these objectives? Amazingly, you could do this with 2 different units. And then when you eventually kill 2 of those units of 40, you bring them back from the dead, which is pretty scary. So Direwolves fill a very specific role, but a very necessary role. The next unit are Fellbats. Fellbats are a unit of 3, with each model in the unit having 3 health each, with a 6-up save and a cheeky good old 6-up ward save. In combat, they've got 3 attacks each. So from a unit of 3, you're going to have 9 attacks, which are damage 2. But they hit on 4s and they wound on 4s. They are fast, movement 12, which is nice. So you can fly up the board. And they have a passive called Fleet and Fell, where this unit can use charge abilities, even if it uses a retreat ability in the same turn. In addition, no mortal damage inflicted on this unit by retreat abilities. This is pretty nice, but there are units like we've seen in Slaves to Darkness, specifically, not the Raptorix. These kind of reminded me of Raptorix, but the other unit that's like them, the little imp ones, which have this ability to like retreat after the Harpies, thank you, that retreat after they move in, which is like a far more dynamic role. And ultimately, these guys have only got a control ability of 1 because they've got the Beast passive. So I think maybe if you were going to take this unit's job would be to move up the board and try to get into the opponent's black lines with an okay damage profile, 9 attacks, damage 2, could be the reason that you decide to take them. But in a roster that's absolutely jam-packed with incredible units, I'm not sure if you will. An interesting point that's been brought up is because Layla, the hero, is going to be able to have D3 attacks to each one of the weapon profiles here. So it'll be 3 plus D3 per model. So a reinforced unit could potentially be 6 models with 6 attacks each at damage 2, which is pretty spicy. Sorry, it's Lauka Vai who can do this. Lauka Vai who can do the buff, which is really interesting. Super interesting. Maybe that makes these more spicy. The next unit we're going to look at are the Vrykros Bloodborne. These are a unit of 3, and they cannot be reinforced to a unit of 6, thankfully. They have got 3 health per model with a 6-up save, and they have a 6-up ward save. Importantly, they've got the vampire keyword, and this is pretty spicy because, as we know, we can get quite a lot of bonuses to vampire units in this army. Specifically, Prince Vhordrai is going to work really well with these because he can potentially give them +1 attack and also give them +1 damage. Their attack profile is pretty interesting with, as I've said, +1 attack being able to come from Vhordrai and +1 damage. So this unit of 3 is potentially going to be doing 12 attacks at damage 3 with crit 2 hits. Radukar can make them have +1 to wound, and I can obviously get all-out attack for +1 to hit. That's an amazing attack profile. I don't know how cheap this unit is. That's pretty interesting, in my opinion. They've also got the Shadow Fast ability, which they can do at the end of any turn, which is wild, where you roll a dice on a 3+, this unit can use this move ability as if it were your movement phase. And just think about that for a moment, because we already know you've got that cheeky redeploy that you can have from Mannfred, making units redeploy into combat. Then we know that Radukar has the ability to move at the end of turn into combat. This unit is now moving at the end of a turn. Radukar's moving at the end of the turn. Everything is moving. Considering they're a vampire or an undead army, they're insanely fast. I've never seen anything like it. And they've also got another ability called Cling to the Shadows, which once per turn in your movement phase, while each mon on this unit is within 1 inch of any terrain features, this unit cannot be targeted by shooting attacks unless the attacking model is within 9 inches of this unit. It's really great to see Games Workshop take one of these really small kind of throwaway model sets that they do and massively improve their effectiveness to the point where I could see taking a unit of 3 of these and comboing them with so many other units. It's wild how good this book is. It's so good. The next unit we're going to look at is a Vargskier. I hope I got that right. With 8 health. It's a single model that can't be reinforced with a 5-up save, a 6-up ward save, but it is a vampire. So if it does fight, it's going to heal D3. And if it does kill a unit, it's going to get 2D3. It's got an okay combat profile with 4 attacks. And that are damage 2 and 2 attacks that damage 3. It's going to be rubbish for holding objectives because it's only got a control score of 1 because it's a beast, and it's got the ability Bounding Haste. So you add 1 to the number of dice rolled when making charge rolls this unit to a maximum of 3. In addition, when this unit uses a charge ability, it can pass through terrain features and enemy models as if it had fly. So a 3d6 charge to get into the enemy backlines with this kind of good fighting unit that can heal a lot. I don't think it's terrible, but I think this book is so packed with incredible options, I don't even know if it's making it in. Varghese are another melee unit. They are a unit of 3, and they move really fast. Each model in this unit has got 4 health for a total of 12 across the unit of 3. They can move 12 inches, and they got a 5-up armor save. Which is okay. They have got a 6-up ward save. They can fly, and they have got the vampire keyword. So you can buff them with a bunch of different buffs. They've got murderous fangs and talons, which are 3 attacks, damage 2 with crit 2 hits. They hit on 4s, which is a bit sad, in my opinion. But they can do a pretty good amount of damage if you took a unit of 6. There's loads of ways to buff them. Vhordrai is going to definitely buff these guys. You can get +1 to wound on these without even thinking about anything else, which is pretty good. Damage 2 is always nice. Rend 1, a little bit lower. They do have this once per turn ability in your movement phase where you can do Death's Descent, where if this unit is not in combat, you remove it from the battlefield and set it up again on the battlefield more than 9 inches from all enemy units. That's great. We've already talked about all the other movement this book can do. The vampires are just going to be everywhere with buffs galore. I really feel like Vhordrai is very integral to the vampire build, but this is super fun. It's important to say that you can teleport this unit. If this unit is not in combat, remove them from the battlefield, set up again on the battlefield more than 9 inches from enemy units. That's what it does. Someone was asking me to be clear, so there we go. Next unit, or next vampire unit we'll look at is the Eskurgan Trueblades. This is the Warcry Warband, so it comes in at a unit size of 8, and they cannot be reinforced, so you can't make them double big, which is good. I want you to know that's good. They've got 2 health each for 16 health across the unit with a 5-up armor save and a 6-up ward save. They have the vampire keyword, so they are going to be able to benefit from Vhordrai's ability to give them +1 attack and +1 damage, which is pretty great. That would mean that them plus the Bloodseeker Palaquin's ability to do an additional +1 attack, that means that you can have 4 attacks, 2s and 2s, rend 1, damage 2 with this unit for 21 attacks at damage 2. They have crit 2 hits, and they are rend 2 against monsters, which is incredibly cool in my opinion. Talking about, they also have another attack profile, which is 5 attacks, which could also be damage 2. Talking about monsters, they have a passive called Krieg of the Eskurgi Renkai, where they subtract 1 from hit rolls from combat attacks made by monsters that target this unit, and they add 1 to hit rolls for combat attacks against monsters. Lastly, they have an ability called Gut-Wrenching Howl, which is done in the combat phase, where you pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit, this unit's curse blood to be the target, you roll a dice, and on a 4-up, that target has strike last. That's right, another unit in this army that has strike last. And I think now we're starting to realize just how integral Vhordrai will probably be to this army. Its ability to buff all of these different vampire units is so strong. The next vampire unit we're going to look at are Blood Knights, and these are stunning. Blood Knights are a unit of 5 with 3 health each with a 3-up armor save. That means a unit of 5 is going to have 15 health with a 3-up save. If you reinforce them to a unit of 10, it's going to be 30 health with a 3-up save. And I know you're going to get super excited and shout at me. That means Neferata can cast a spell on their incredible 3-up save, and they're going to have an unrendable armor save. In addition, they have that cheeky 6-up ward save, which is pretty nice. Now, let's talk about their weapons. Each model of the unit is armed with the Templar weapon, which is 3 attacks, 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage 1. On the charge, it becomes damage 2. If it's hitting infantry, it's rend 2. If you have Vhordrai nearby, that means you can add +1 attack and also +1 damage eventually if you start wiping out units, which means a reinforced unit of Blood Knights could have up to 51 attacks because the Bloodseeker Palaquin is also given an additional attack. That is going to be 2s and 2s, and then it's going to be damage 3, which is super nice. Okay, then you've got Riders of Ruin, which is a passive that it has, where when this unit moves, it can pass through models in an enemy infantry unit and can pass through the combat ranges of enemy infantry units, but it cannot end its move in combat. So this means you can charge straight through screens. Thankfully, this book doesn't have a 3d6 charge for this unit, otherwise it'd be crazy. But the sheer number of strike last effects that exist means that these guys are going to do some pretty crazy work. And lastly, they've got the ability Trample to Dust, which you can do in any charge phase, where you pick an enemy unit this unit passed across his turn to be the target, and you roll a d3. On a 2+, you inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. That's not anywhere near as impressive as its pure stat line and its ability to get stuck into a fight. I think the one problem is because it's super survivable, this unit could end up getting bogged down in combat. But I would say with the other mixture of vampire units you can have in an army, this is an absolutely stunning unit. Next unit, sticking on the cavalry theme, are the Black Knights. They are a unit of 5 cavalry, and each model's got 3 health each. They've got a 4-up armor save, and they have all the buffs that you can give to Death Rattle, including being able to heal, potentially even bring back models from the dead, as well as giving them ward saves and all the other spicy stuff you can do with Death Rattle, which is very, very strong. You can reinforce this unit up to a unit of 10, and at least Mannfred is going to be able to give them +1 attack. There may be other sources of +1 attack. But just taking that into account, a unit of 10 could have 30 attacks hitting on 4s, wound on 3s, rend 1, which I know can be improved to rend 2, and they get +1 damage on the charge, which is damage 2. So a unit of 10 is going to be 30 attacks, damage 2, which is, in my opinion, pretty incredible. You can also make them pile in and attack twice, thanks to, obviously, the Necromancer. And you're thinking, Rob, that's pretty good. Well, it gets even better because on a turn in which they charge, their unit also gets crit mortals on their lances. So I think we can get up to +2 attacks. So a unit of 10 is going to be 40 attacks with mortals at damage 2, piling in twice. So 80 attacks, crit mortals, damage 2. Feels insane, is what I'm going to say. Great unit. The next unit we'll look at is a big old monster called a Terrorgeist. Pretty famous in Age of Sigmar land. With 14 health and a 5-up save, it's fair to say it's not necessarily a frontline bruiser that's going to take a good hit back. But thankfully, it moves 12 inches, and it's going to be able to be pretty good in a fight with an army that has so many strike last abilities and lots of strike first abilities. What does it do when it gets there? Well, let me tell you, it's pretty good. It's got a Death Shriek shot, which does D6 damage you can do in shooting, which is pretty funny. It's also a companion attack. But it's got a Fanged Maw attack, which is 3 attacks that does D6 damage, and Skeletal Talons are 6 attacks, which are damage 2. These are companion abilities, and Lauka Vai can make monsters with companion keyword, like companion abilities on monsters, have D3 attacks. I think it's via a spell, which means you can potentially have 6 attacks with the Fang Maw, and you can have 9 attacks with Skeletal Talons. The reason this is important because this has got a passive called Gaping Maw, where each time an attack made with this unit's Fang Maw scores a critical hit, the attack inflicts 6 mortal damage. 6 mortal damage, which is insane. Okay? Insane. With 6 attacks potentially, which is going to do, you know, on average it just does 6, but you can spike insanely high. Lastly, especially as mortal damage has generally been reduced, lastly, it's got a rampage that you can do in the combat phase called Sonic Assault, where if this unit charges its turn, you pick an enemy unit in combat with it to be the target. You roll a dice for each model in the target unit. If 3 or more of the dice have the same result, this unit has strike first. If it rolls 6 or more dice with the same result, then it has strike first, and that unit cannot use commands, which is pretty great. So obviously this gets better if you're hitting a horde, and isn't very good if you're fighting an enemy monster. But it's still great, and you can just do a ton of mortal damage with this. And in a book that's just got everything you could ever need, this is just the cherry on top. The other monster that you can take is the Zombie Dragon with 14 health, 5-up save. It's very similar, at least in survivability, to the Terrorgeist. But it does a lot less damage, with only 3 attacks, damage 3, and 7 attacks, damage 2 from its attacks, but can be buffed like the Terrorgeist with Lauka Vai, but unable to do all of that mortal damage. It's not quite as punchy and still has that survivability issue. You are able to put this unit into reserve and also bring it up 9 inches away from enemy units, and has a unique rampage called Armor Crunch done in the combat phase, where if this unit charges turn, you pick an enemy cavalry or monster. In combat, you roll a dice, and if the roll is equal to or exceeds the target save characteristic, you can inflict 3 mortal damage. Ultimately, this unit is fine in a book that's absolutely cooked, so you're never going to see this, and you'll always just take the Terrorgeist. I know this is going to seem weird, but I'm leaving Nagash until the end because I have to review Nagash every time I do a death review. And Nagash is his own certain type of power. And if you are building Nagash into an army, then I guess you're really picking all the best bits around Nagash. You probably don't need me to review this, but I will anyway. 18 health, 3-up save, a 9-cast wizard. It's pretty crazy. Has got the ability to auto-slay monsters at the end of every turn, thanks to Hand of Dust, which is honestly bananas. Sorry, enemy heroes or monsters. It's got the ability to auto-slay either of them, which is disgusting and should be banned from the game. It's the ability to cast 9 spells with +2 to cast, so put all of the manifestations on the board, as well as being able to cast all of those spells. He's got his own unique spell, which he can cast multiple times, where you can do D3 mortal damage to multiple units. In addition, can pick units to have 5-up ward saves, which just seems bananas, especially as we know now Death Rattle and also zombies can all have 5-up ward saves, which is so dumb. And then also return a number of slain models to those units as well, which is going to key in so incredibly well with your battle traits to bring it up. And then lastly, as if he didn't do enough, he has this once per battle ability in the hero phase to bring back an entire non-unique death unit from the grave at full strength, which would be a unit of, say, I don't know, 10 Blood Knights, which is pretty good. So Nagash, Vhordrai, 10 Blood Knights, I guess feels good. If you're building the horrible list, 40 zombies coming back from the dead and going back down and then having a 5-up ward save feels good as well. Nagash is brilliant. This has been an incredibly long review and has taken a long time. Thanks for the Twitch chat for hanging out. I really love what they have done with this book. This book is super strong. And I guess that's one of the reasons I like it. One of the main reasons I like it is I don't think that they skipped on War Scrolls. They didn't just say, there's one of the vampire heroes, it doesn't do anything. Yeah, like Kritza. They were like, whatever, Kritza. They gave Kritza a reason to play. Like, honestly, even the little ogre bodyguard guys that go in Radukar, they could see play. There's 2 War Scrolls I didn't like. Fellbats were fine, I guess, and the solo Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon was rubbish. But Vhordrai is integral to the army. Mannfred feels integral to the army. Neferata feels integral to a different style of army. All of the foot vampires feel like they build really well into their own thing. This is an amazing book with multiple different builds with multiple different units, some of which are really powerful and some of which are just super fun, like Kritza. And if you're a Soulblight Gravelords player, you should be fucking stoked. Sorry for swearing. So yeah, you should be super hype about this. But list building is going to be fun. You're going to have so much fun. And I hope you enjoyed the video. I've still got loads more videos to do. We've got a tier list to do. We've got a points review to do. We are going to do list building at some point as well, which is going to be fun. I just want to say thanks for watching the video. Please do like and subscribe. You could join my Patreon to help support me make content like this, which would be cool. That's the best way to help support me and all the hard work that I do. And I want to say thanks very much to the Twitch chat and everyone else who's watched this video. And lastly, I want to thank my friend Warhammer Rob, for whom I made this video, because he's always been a good friend to me and I love him. So thanks very much for watching the video, and I'll see you soon.